Good morning, and thank you for joining us on Resilient You on Power 98.5 FM satellite radio. We have a very special guest today, Leslie Ferguson, who is joining us from California. Leslie has had resilience from a topic that's very special to me. Leslie has lived with a mentally ill parent, and then she was a foster child, and she came out triumphant. So we are very happy to welcome her and hear about how she was resilient in her life. Leslie, thank you so much, and welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. So usually what I do is ask our guests to tell a little bit about themselves. I know I shared a little detail already, but um, why don't you tell us about yourself?
Okay, I am a former English teacher and college writing instructor. I now work in publishing and I'm enjoying being a published author, which is a dream come true.
Wonderful. And I happen to have a copy of your book here, which I read, and I wonderful. When I was her daughter, and you want everyone to know it's available on Amazon. Where can they purchase this book?
Currently, it's on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. It is free on Kindle Unlimited right now for a limited time, and the ebook is $4.99. So if you want to jump in on that sale, after that, it should be available on Kobo and as Nook and other digital retailers.
Wonderful. Now, this they should know that this is a memoir. So, a memoir is a true story. And who is your audience? Who do you think should read this book? The back says 7-year-old Leslie has a serious problem. Someone is trying to kill her. Um, who should read this?
Well, I've heard a lot from people who've read it already saying that everybody should read it. So I'll second that. However, more specifically, anybody who has known anybody or been in a family with somebody who is afflicted with mental illness, and anybody who has been in foster care, anybody who works with children, anybody who works in the child welfare system or in social work, just so they can kind of get an inside glimpse as to what a child experiences in these situations, living and dealing with a parent who's mentally ill, a single parent who's mentally ill, and looking at the family struggle to navigate all of this. And then anybody who wants to know what it's really like when a kid is in foster care.
Yeah, yeah, and I was raised by my mother who was mentally ill. I also went into foster care, and although I didn't get adopted, I went back to my mother. Um, and so, it's really interesting. I think that in my own experience, um, it gave me something to strive for. I think, coming from that place of um, where we didn't have things that other people had. Um, it personally, it made me want to strive and do better, although it took longer in my case. So college wasn't something I was prepared to do right out of high school. Um, but I went back later, and it was all
Mm,
good when I had the right structure.
yeah.
So when you were younger, um, and you had a sibling. I didn't have a sibling. I had a half sister, but my mom gave her up. So,
Mm.
um, so that I'd like to hear about that. How how that. And again, I don't want to give away what you have in the book, but what do you think about your upbringing in terms of how it formed you?
Wow. Well, I was a sibling and then I was an only child in a sense because I moved on without my brother and we were separated. And even though we did see each other occasionally, it really was like I was trying to now navigate my new life with this new family and trying to forget the past. And unfortunately, that meant somewhat forgetting everything that had happened, forgetting that I had a brother, even though on a logical level, I knew that I still had that family. I knew that he was my brother, but we were just going in two separate directions. And at the time, it was what I needed to do to survive. I went into major denial of everything I had been through. And that, looking back on that now, I realized that was my coping strategy, my defense mechanism, so that I could, in fact, survive.
Mm.
Um, and, looking at, I think it's fortunate, people who do read the book will get to know what happens with the relationship between my brother and me. And it's a happy story, thankfully, but we had to come back to each other. And it was, I was the one who had basically tried to move on. And he was always still my brother and maybe trying to make more of an effort. But I needed to distance myself from him in very meaningful ways. And when I was ready to come back into his life, he welcomed me with open arms, and there was no resentment. He was just ready to be there for me. And that was incredible.
Wow. So you talk about, denying what you had been through to survive.
Yeah.
Um, and when I read your book, I felt like, you were going through things and being very reflective, whether you were aware of your feelings or not. I feel like you were able to, always look ahead and kind of have a plan and have a, a way to stay safe, and so that's really interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you say that as well, because I I tried to reconstruct what I experienced so that I could bring the essence of this to the reader. And it's hard to know how much of what I feel now was actually beginning then, or if I am just have that advantage of being grown up and having survived this to where I look back and relive that trauma so that I can create the scenes for the reader and
Mm.
then bring my insights to it. How much of it was me at the time being so keen and insightful. I don't think I was. There were some, to some degree, yes, there was always that element of hope of it has to be different, it has to be better, right? And I think that's one thing that kept me going. And I don't ever really think I felt like, oh, I'm just going to give up. This is horrible and meaningless and worthless. There was always tomorrow.
Mm. Right, right. Well, that's interesting because I also am in the process of well, I've written my memoir, but to go back to those times and recreate those
Yeah.
scenes and try and have that reader be in your shoes at the age of 8 or whatever, it's definitely interesting, but you did that. I can attest to it. We were there with you, and
Thank you.
it was, yeah, it's wonderfully written. And
Thank you.
um I think, when people go back to revisit trauma, and again, I want to remind our readers that trauma is not necessarily when you break your leg or get into a horrific car accident. It can be perceived. So, you know, a child having a single parent, that can be a trauma because they were abandoned and neglected. And you know there's everyone's different, so you have your personality that comes into play and your birth order, and you have so many things that are um, to your advantage, and then you have other things that you don't have, you're not born with. So you know each of us have that innate survival skill, right? So when we're in survival mode, we either fight, flight, or freeze. And if you don't know how to identify your emotions, if you don't know how to process them, it comes back later in
Yeah.
another way, right? So there's people that I help or deal with, even encounter, that have issues. And when they trace it back, when they take that time to dig in, that's when they realize that this thing happened. Um,
Yeah.
I'll share a quick story. My daughter was, um, we were at a baseball game, and we were in the bathroom, and she was 3 at that time, and I stepped out of the bathroom to take a phone call. So when I went to open the door, it she had locked it, and she turned out the light. So here she is inside this bathroom. I'm talking to her through the door, trying to get someone to open it. And she was in there maybe 5 minutes, long enough for them to run and get the key. And she was okay talking the whole time. Um, but I ended up having anxiety from that experience.
Mm.
So she's 9 now. And if she's somewhere and I can't see her, I have this innate feeling that I better go and check on her, even though she's probably fine. She's watching YouTube in the living room, you know? But the truth of the matter is, it was traumatic to me because I would never want my child to be locked in a dark room without
Right.
me, you know?
Right.
Um, but that's just one example of something that, it was traumatic, more so to me than to her. She's not afraid of the dark or going anywhere by herself. Like, she's fine. So
Yeah.
that's something I just wanted to convey to our listeners, that, trauma can be many shapes and sizes, and the way that we react to those things in the present and then even later years, it's really interesting. So you were able to go back, revisit your life as a child, through the experiences um, of going into foster care as well.
Right.
So how did you and your brother were separated, because they didn't allow siblings to be kept together in the foster system, right? So
Right.
how did you change when that happened?
Well, so we were separated when I was 10 and he was just turned 9. And we were separated because we were not of the same gender. And the first time we were separated, we were placed in McLaren Hall, which was a juvenile housing facility in, oh, I forget what city it was in. And he was, in one wing or one dorm, and I was in with older kids and all girls. And we didn't get to see each other a lot. And I pretty easily was able to just put it out of my mind that not only had we just been ripped away from our mother, who was, mid psychotic break, but now I'm separated from my brother. It's my only link to my family and everything I've known. And I was able to just be with the other kids and go to the classes that they had for us, this little school. And I was excelling. And I think it was just what I did, because what else would I do if I wouldn't just follow the rules and do everything I was supposed to do and make the most of it? Then I would have to really face what had just happened. And without knowing it at the time, that would have just been too difficult. So I just kind of put my head down and moved forward. I earned points so that I could spend them in the store. This like honor system they had with, if you do your chores, you earn points and you get to take little field trips and do all these things. And I was doing that. And, my brother, the times when I would run into him very infrequently, he was reaching out to me. Leslie, hi, how are you? I miss you. And I was just like, don't bother me. Like, isn't that strange that I would just kind of, instead of take him under my wing and want to just be with him, but I didn't know how. I didn't know how to be as a girl in the world facing her brother and who's had these things happen. And so it was really about moving forward and not looking back.
Yeah, and what you said, that what you may know now, that you it would have been too difficult to face, especially alone. You situation with your mother was unstable,
Right.
and you couldn't live a normal life with the structure maybe that you wanted. So
Right.
now here you are in this group home, which I was in. A battered women's shelter, but it was similar. The
Wow.
kids were
Yeah.
separated from the parents, and the mother
Wow.
was kept, and the whole facility was locked. And it was bizarre. I was
Mm-hmm.
so, I don't know, for me being in that place, it was smaller, and they kept saying, "You're here for your safety." But I didn't feel
You
safe. I
didn't feel
was,
safe.
you know, it was like I didn't have safety at home, but this was like I
Right.
was in a foreign place and I didn't have, but it sounds like you had some structure, and you could be responsible, and you could earn things, and you could experience what a normal life was.
Yeah.
That's that's just amazing.
For some
Um,
reason, I just thrived on structure and kind of needed that. And it, when I would see my brother, it was like I couldn't talk about anything deep. There's um, the memory that I have of running into him in the swimming pool and just basically then, having him like, watch me, I'm going to do a flip now, I'm going to swim away, I'm going to do backflips. And it was just so superficial because kids don't even have the tools yet to speak about things on a deeper level. And if they did, what would they say? Would they say, "Oh, I hope you're okay. I hope mom's not trying to kill herself right now. What's going to happen next?" And my brother was already on that level, and even though he was younger than I was, it was like he was supposed to be taking care of me. And I don't know how we were lucky in that we made it through that. That we um, and I always wonder why some people have resiliency in some ways and others seem to crumble under the same circumstances or similar circumstances.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. I mean, I work with a lot of youth, and in a behavioral sense, everybody communicates their needs in a different way.
Yeah.
And, when you get to the root of the trauma, it's really interesting to see how they process it. Um, so, looking at your situation, um, you didn't really have the structure, then you had the structure, and you were able to thrive and succeed. And um, speaking of succeeding, you went on to be an all-American athlete and a record holder in women's basketball
Yes.
later. And so in terms of the whole theme of resilience, um, so you talked about when you were 10, you were, in that foster or in that situation in the group home. Um, what happened next? Let's get to the.
Well, I was placed fairly quickly in a foster home, and my brother was still at the group home, but I was moved to Pico Rivera, and I didn't know at the time what I was going through. I can only guess as to what it was, that I was already suffering from depression and um, this intense feeling of loneliness and homesickness. And I would go visit my grandparents for a weekend and cry and beg for them to take me so that I wouldn't have to um, go back, so that I could be with them instead. And they just kept, sending me back to the home, probably not even realizing how awful, how sick, and how there was probably one of the most hopeless I'd ever felt, the most hopeless situation, which is strange. Even when I was with my mom and she was very ill and very, having psychotic episodes that were very extreme, I didn't feel so alone, so hopeless. as when I
Mhm.
was in a foster home, completely taken away from my family. Um, and then I spoke up, talked to my social worker, and eventually found me another home, which turned out to be a home that was good on the surface. When we went to visit to check it out, everything seemed like it was going to be wonderful. And it was just very abusive, emotionally and psychologically abusive and neglectful. I mean, they were withholding food, and it was it was not a good situation at all. And then at that time I was in the 6th grade and was at a new school. Now I was in La Puente, California, and from there, just events kind of started to unfold. Um, and I met somebody who really kind of took me on and learned about me and wanted to help. And, as you read in the book, this was a very, very important person who was instrumental in my future and even still today.
Mhm. Now, when I read about that, I thought about that person being like an angel, right, who
Yeah,
protected you. Um, Now, when you were rescued, if I, use that
sure.
for a word, um, did you, do you remember how you felt? Did you feel worthy, and did you feel deserving of that?
So at the time, it literally was, this surprise that this question I was asked, did I want to, you know, basically change my situation with this person's help? And of course I did, so I jumped at it, but I didn't think about anything deeply as far as, oh, what is this going to mean? It was just going where the path led. A path opened up here. This was an opportunity and I followed it. And it was weird, it was weird. And also hopeful. And that I think I was really aware of. Just, okay, here's another place that I don't know. I'm going here because what else am I supposed to do? I've got to go somewhere. And I remember the night, driving to this new home, that it was so dark and we were driving into the La Habra Heights, which is, very hilly part, windy part of a city. And this house that was dark and new and being taken to this room that was now my room. And it just felt so, you know, um, it's interesting. I've never had anybody just ask me that outright. I think I portray it in the book in a way that was true to me at the time, which was this brand new experience and just kind of checking everything out and trying to take in all the details around me and just keep surviving. So, and that it's turned into such a wonderful thing was, I don't even know. I don't even know how that happened and how, people will say, well, you must have been quite a special kid. And it's like, well, maybe, but I was also just literally like a stringy haired, skinny kid who was lost, who needed help. And then the people who step in to help, I don't even know how they do that. I don't even know. And, this person, I mean, she's just an amazing person. If you want to say an angel, absolutely.
Mhm.
Because how does a stranger basically just say, come with me and I'm going to change my life and sacrifice everything so that you won't have to?
Mhm. Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That is just amazing. When when I went into foster care, I was older. I was a teenager.
Okay.
Um, my mother was um, like, she had come into the room and started fighting with me, accusing me of
Mm,
doing something to her. And she had delusions. And, you know, I would either respond with, "No, mom, I'm not doing anything," and hoping she would believe me and go away. but
Yeah.
but that wouldn't happen. She would
Yeah.
fight with me, and she was just so, in her delusional state and
Right.
not aware of any logic. So,
Right.
this one night she came in, she accused me of being on the phone, and she ripped the phone out of the wall. Back then we had cords and phones in the wall. So
Right. Yes,
she
we did.
ripped the phone out of the wall. She said that, if I didn't want to be there, she would call somebody and I could leave. And I just felt like I would agree, and I would say, "Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm ready. I want to leave. I don't want to be here. This is crazy."
Yeah.
And she called, and she stayed so calm as the police came and took me. 20 minutes later, this was like 11:30 at night. I had been
Wow.
sleeping. They said, "Pack a bag." I was like standing in my room. The room is like spinning because I'm like, "Is this really happening? My
Yeah.
mother is like kicking me out?" And so I went to this house in the dark, not knowing. I remember the clicking of the car door shutting, the heavy police car door shutting, and going in there with my black garbage bag of belongings. I don't even know what
Hmm.
I brought. And the woman, greeted me, and she said, "We'll talk tomorrow." And she took me to the basement, which was a finished basement. I remember it had black carpet and white bedding. There was a
Hmm.
nice day bed in the room, um, and there was a night light in the room. I had my own bathroom, and it was, nicer than a room I ever had.
Yeah.
But I remember just sitting there and just being awake and just listening to every little sound,
Yeah.
and you couldn't sleep, and you're like, and I remember thinking, this woman just left me alone, and nothing would have been good no matter if she had stayed with me,
Right.
because then you have this stranger with you at night. But
Right.
um and for me, the next day she said, "Okay, you're going to go to school today, and I'm going to drive you." Well, I always took a bus, and I never had to. So that was weird. She drops me at school. She said, "My aunt is going to pick you up." So now it's like some woman's going to pick me up. And after school, her daughter had a modeling um, competition. At the end of her modeling school, they did a little show and everything. So I had to go to this modeling show for this girl, and she also had a son. Well, the son had ADHD and he was just hyper, and it was a strange dynamic, but she included me, which was,
Yeah.
odd, and I had no idea what would. And afterwards we went out to dinner, and she told me, "Get anything you want."
Hmm.
And it was in 3 months time, maybe it was less. I was getting all A's in school. She
Wow.
got me a job. I was working at the local grocery store. I had opened up a bank account, and she was talking with me about my future.
Wow.
And the pain, the fear, it hit me. And she also had me reconnect with my father, who my biological father, where my parents had split and divorced when I was 5. Um, my biological father was an alcoholic and had gone through recovery, but he couldn't have me in his life. Well,
Hmm.
this woman was such an angel, like you said, and she was trying to do everything to fix my life. And for the most part, it would have, if not for these unresolved feelings I had.
Yeah.
I ended up going back to my mother. I dropped out of school,
Hmm.
and there's more. I'll have to release my book, and you can hear more about my story.
Yeah.
But you know, to hear you talk about that, being whisked away to something new, and what were your options, and
Yeah.
how you used it to your advantage. So you do you think that you started to heal at that point with the structure, with a new home and a family? Do you think that you started healing then?
I think then it was the glimpse of the opportunity to be, to exist, and to not have the daily struggle of the fear of my biological mom, or in a foster home uh, with people who don't care. Um, it became really clear to me very soon that these people cared about me and they were trying to help. They encouraged me to go to counseling. I remember a couple of counseling sessions, and it's funny is um, this person said, you don't remember, but we were trying to encourage you to go to therapy more, and you didn't want to go. You were, you know, you just wouldn't. And I said, yeah, I was probably embarrassed because the message was, you're broken, you need to be fixed. And that goes to show the stigma that was attached to it, instead of like, no, this is what we do. This is what people do to get help so they can start processing and healing. But I don't think I started processing or healing then. I think I was given the opportunity to stop undergoing um, that very harsh trauma, and I was coming of age. So I just put my head down, tried to be as perfect as possible, except when even though you want to be perfect, there's still the aspect of you, you get angry, you say things you shouldn't, and then you feel like everybody hates you. I was caught in that kind of a spiral too. And I just wanted to be perfect because I wanted to be loved. And I thought, if I do well in school, if I just am good at everything, then what choice will people have but to like me and to love me? And so that structure of knowing pretty soon that I was I was never going to be given up on. And that was a hard lesson I had to learn, right? That these people were never going to give up on me, because I always believed it somewhere inside that there was just going to come a time where they would say, that's it, we're done, you're out, we don't want you. And but it never happened. I just kept going to school and kept playing sports and kept just getting as good as I could.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, I want our listeners to know that our kids need to have outlets for support.
Yes.
So if you're a parent, if you're a caregiver, a grandparent, aunt, uncle, brother, sister, um, try to remember that kids need a softer, kinder path. They need
Yes.
something that, where they can be open to share their feelings. The world is so difficult now with, everything that kids have on their shoulders, whether it's, schedules that are too busy and pressure from school or from
Yeah.
parents, or even, what they see and what they feel they have to aspire to. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I just want to say that, you never know what someone is going through or how they're processing it, but it's so important to help to take care of our kids. So keep keep up um
Absolutely.
that path. Um so so Leslie, you mentioned about having depression and you felt hopeless. Then you maintained hope through it all, and eventually you did go to the counseling. And um when we fast forward, um you you excelled in sports, right? So,
Right.
um, how did that happen? You want to talk about your sports, or do you want to just fast forward to your
Yeah.
academic?
No,
Yeah.
I mean, let's just in a nutshell, I can say fairly quickly, hopefully, that I remember coming home one day and saying, there's this thing called volleyball and they're having tryouts and I want to go, I want to play. And I went, and this was in junior high, right? And I was on the volleyball team, and um, I remember, and a lot of my teammates from that time will remember, that this person who I was living with at the time, who had rescued me, would come after her day of teaching, and she would come to the school where I was and get all of us volleyball players and load us into the back of her Volvo which, now we could never do that. But
Mhm.
this was, early 1980s. And we would all just kind of climb in, and she would drive us to our volleyball games at some other local junior high. And I remember she had a gate between the back seat and the back area of the Volvo station wagon. And that was because she had dogs and she would want to, keep them in the cage. And so we all piled in like dogs, which I think is kind of funny because, she historically has been a rescuer of animals and a rescuer of me. And so always the joke is when she mentions her rescued animals, I can be kind of lumped in with them. And so they just let me, and they encouraged me, and they supported me. And this was my outlet at the time. I didn't have anybody trying to encourage me to process and journal or draw. But I got physical, and it gave me a place to kind of channel my frustration or my anger or angst, and without even realizing it at the time. And that just continued. And I was tall, I was athletic, and I worked hard, and I loved it. I loved to play. So I was the person who, when practice was over, I wanted to stay for 2 hours and continue, hitting balls or shooting hoops. And so they provided the opportunity. And that's why I think, resiliency comes and goes. And some people who are more resilient, maybe they have these opportunities that others don't have, these resources, which include support. They often include money. They include time. And if you have to be focused on something else, like what if I had to go home and take care of my siblings because my parents had to work? Well, then I don't get opportunities to go play sports, And I think I was very fortunate that they were genuinely interested in helping me thrive. And that's something that, I'll forever be grateful for. So I did. I excelled, and in school as well. And I don't know how. I don't know how. I just did.
Mm, wonderful. Well, it's a great example, for others who, either have had a parent who was absent or,
Yeah.
neglectful. And I think that, the fact that you wrote your book, it's just amazing because it's
Thank you.
inspiration for so many people on so many levels. Um, I don't know. I've asked you a few questions earlier about, how did you deal with a difficult situation, and it was tied to the sports aspect. Um, I'm curious when you think about a difficult situation, um, what, how did you deal with that? And I know that
Yeah.
coming from a position of not having and then having support, um maybe maybe over time you were able to better deal with things that happened. I don't know if that's true. What do you think?
Yeah. So I think any child of trauma comes out of the gates. We have anxiety, we have depression always kind of knocking at the door. We have low self esteem. We have abandonment issues. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And I, it was important to me to be good at what I was doing because I thought, well, why am I going to try? If I'm going to try to do something, I'm going to do it the best that I can. And the situation in sports, that I had mentioned before was where our coach had pitted me and one of my friends against each other. And we would, duke it out. And it was all under the assumption that it was going to make us better and make us stronger because we were both talented. We were both good basketball players. But it basically just made me want to fight. It was like a negative way of channeling this energy that was all pent up inside of me. And for her too. I mean, it's like after that, our friendship kind of crumbled. And I just kept showing up to practice. I would show up feeling like I was embarrassed or angry or anxious and didn't really want to be there. But then once we played the game, I would still just go and I would just do it. And exerting energy through sports was such a great stress relief. So I dealt with it without even realizing, that just kind of releasing things through sports was happening. But I would go home in tears after practice, and I hated it. And I hated practice. I wanted it to kind of be over, but I knew I had to keep showing up because I loved the game so much. And if I didn't show up, then I was a quitter, and then I wouldn't get to practice being good. So it was more beneficial for me to show up, even though I was hating it at the time. And I just kept showing up, even though it was hard, even though I didn't want to. And someone recently asked me, because I said something to the effect of coping is a choice. And they said, really, you believe that coping is a choice? And I said, yes, I do, because at the end of the day, you have the choice to either move forward or not. And it's the decision that you make next that matters. And thankfully, I was in a place where now I was learning about how to follow through with commitment. I'd made a commitment to my team, so I had to keep going. And these were skills and traits instilled in me from these new people that I had met who were helping me. And they taught me that sometimes the right thing is the hard thing, or the hard thing to do is the right thing to do. You might not like it, but you have to follow through. And so I continued coping, even though sometimes I wanted to give up.
Mhm. So you were able to have an outlet to channel things you were going through and keep you on the right path. But then there were pitfalls, and unfortunately, relationships got,
Yeah.
affected by it.
Yeah.
Um, it's interesting because everything we go through, um, you know, it makes us who we are. And coping strategies, you can have either positive or negative coping strategies. And so, but I think the more honest you are, and that's one of the first things I ask people to do in my book, Emotional Strength
Yeah.
Explained, is to be honest with themselves, because I think deep down we know that right answer. We know the next step.
Yeah.
It's just not always easy to take that, And as for me, I was never on a sports team because I had asthma growing up, and
Yeah.
it was like, yeah, okay, let's. I was the last pick in phys ed in gym class. I was the last pick. But now having my own kids and my husband, he says, no, he's on the team. He has to go. Even if my son hurt himself, he has to go and sit on the
Yeah.
bench. That's his team. He has to. So I've learned a lot,
Yeah.
in committing, um, you know, and my outlet was always work. I found in my career that I was able to excel and
Yeah.
help others. And it's interesting because relationships always kind of took second place for me. I think because I didn't feel
Yeah.
safe in them because of what I didn't get as a child. So it's yeah, it's
I was the opposite. I was always trying to make you love me, you know?
yeah, that's so funny. So
And
you
you
so
said something that kind of struck me about, um, that you excelled at work and I excelled at school and basketball. And for some people, maybe they just haven't found yet what they excel at, because whatever it is that we find, if we're good at it, that's going to encourage us to continue working hard, because then we know what that feels like to reap the rewards of that. But if you haven't found that yet, if you're still struggling, if maybe you're doing things because other people are telling you you need to do them, but you haven't found your path and what you love and what you're good at, I could see how coping would be really challenging, you know?
yeah, yeah, it's true. People that have options, they sometimes don't realize how fortunate they are.
Yeah.
Um, And again, I in New Jersey where we are, we have a lot of different classes. Um, so you can drive like 5 miles in any direction and hit a city with
Hmm.
low income. And it's just interesting to see all the support organizations we have now and all the options. There's a
Yeah, it's
new
great.
there's a new number that people can text if they want to get help. There's
Hmm.
also the National Mental Health Hotline. Um, so there's a lot of options for people, no matter where they are. I think the thing that I would love everyone to know is that you don't have to feel like you're not good enough if you have mental health challenges, or if you're
Right.
feeling down or depressed. If you, but again, mental health is health. So remember that.
Yeah.
Um, the new number to text is 74141. So text 74141 if you need support and help. Um, it's very important, and hopefully, if you're listening to this, Leslie has shown that you don't have to give up. You never have to give up. There's always chances that will come. Tomorrow is a new day.
Yeah.
Um, you can seek healthy relationships at any point in time. Um, and and again, it's important to be open, be honest. Um, I think there were a few points in your book that I wanted to talk about.
Sure.
But before we do that, do you have anything else you want to share with our listeners?
Well, speaking a little bit more about um, there's always options. I think that I want people to know that they're not alone. There's always somebody else who you can learn from or speak to, or um, just I think in this life a lot there's a lot of feeling alone and a lot of thinking that you're the only one who's suffering or there's nowhere for you to go. So I love that you gave that hotline number. And um, I was thinking about what I was saying, like if you haven't found what you're good at, it's about finding what you love and finding something that you can really give your time to. I love the idea of this concept of find out what you're good at and do that, and find out
Mm,
what you're good at, and then if you love it, give it away, help others. And a lot of times it's through helping others that we help ourselves and we don't even realize. This is how a lot of
mm,
parents come to say that having children was what made them better people. It's because we rely on others, and our relationships and our interactions with people push us to become better. And this is how one way in which a community thrives is that we all rely on each other. And so I hope that, I have found that writing is a great outlet for me. And I know a lot of other people for whom that's true as well. And to just keep writing, processing, drawing, keep being creative, keep striving to process what you're going through. And it may take time, but there is healing on the other side of that.
mm. It's so true. When you were talking about there's having options, and there's always someone to learn from and speak to, and if you can find that thing that you're good at. um, I had a neighbor, and their son was graduating from high school, and his name was Nick. And I said, Nick, I'm so happy for you. What are you going to do? And he says, oh, I don't know. He was so overwhelmed.
Mm.
um, and so I said, well, at that time I was doing resume writing, and I said, well, if you're not going to go to school right now, I can help you if you're looking to find a job.
Mm.
That's what I do resumes. I can help you. And he said, no, I don't want to work. I said, okay, well, that's going to be a problem, because if you
Right.
don't want to work and you don't want to go to school, I'm sure your parents don't want you sitting at home. Well, he said, I'll figure it out. I like sports. I said, oh, well, there's a lot you can do with
Yeah.
sports. And when I talked with him a little more, he wanted to be like a sports broadcaster. He knew all the teams, all
Hmm.
the stats, all the scores. He knew he was betting on sports games, even though he was younger, underage. He was
Yeah.
still winning, and he just had all his knowledge. I tried to help him, and unfortunately, he didn't accept the help. He died from a drug overdose.
Oh, wow.
He had an outlet. He was working out.
Yeah.
And it was, I think, 2 years after his graduation from high school. He went to the gym one day and overdosed in one of the rooms at the gym.
Oh my gosh.
I I can't tell you how this made me feel. Even though I had tried to reach
Yeah.
out to him once,
Yeah.
I never did again. I I remember talking to his mother, and she had gone for support, thank God, because she was a mess. I mean, no parent should have to see their parent or see their child pass away. But, it was just such a thing that he just covered it up, that they didn't know he was using
Yeah.
drugs, and it just overtook him. And so I just really love what you said about having an outlet, but
A
also
healthy, positive outlet because
talk to
otherwise, right.
yeah, and talking about your feelings, even though it's difficult at first.
Yeah.
It's something that, even a lot of men may not want to do. Um, you know, kids, if you got criticized by your parents for different things, give it another try, because
Yeah.
it's important to have that open dialogue, to know what's going on, and
Yeah.
for everybody really to be able to talk about their feelings. If people are in any relationship where there's a disconnect, or it's not balanced, it becomes difficult, and in some cases toxic even. But it's something that's so important to find, that to make sure you set your boundaries, get in touch with your own feelings, and understand what it is that is going to help you. And you're not alone. I've helped people who've been in relationship issues throughout my experiences, my education, and
Mm.
to hear the hope they have after hearing my experience, to say, hey, you can come out of
Yeah.
this and you'll be okay, and they'll be okay. You
Yeah.
can, there is a way. And it just really resonates with me um, that people need to understand that you can talk about your feelings, and you can get to a better place, even if it's small
Yeah.
steps, micro steps. We take small steps, small risks. We slowly become
Right.
more open to change. And it's something that is really the path to healing. That's you know that is so true. um
Right. And we all, at the end of the day, we make our own decisions. But I think speaking up is huge. I look at my situation. If I hadn't spoken up in the first foster home I was in, I wouldn't have made it to the next foster home, and then I wouldn't have met this person. So it's like there is a path, and if you stay moving toward it, moving forward and not back, and not holding yourself back with unhealthy outlets, um, then you open up opportunities for yourself that you can't see right now. And I worked with teenagers for many, many years, and one thing I would say to them is, this is not the end of the world. Like if you don't learn MLA format for your paper, that's okay. You're going to be fine. Just breathe. You have resources to help you. You can look up how you're supposed to do your works cited. That's okay. It's okay, because at that age, the prefrontal cortex is not yet developed. And so we put so much pressure on young people to have it all together, to have all the answers, to do the right thing. And they need support. They need kind, and you said it earlier, soft support that can guide them and help them keep hope alive and find what it is that drives them every day in a positive way.
Yeah, because we don't want to shut them down and make them feel not
Right,
good enough to then not have
right.
that fear, which that's what happened to me. Um, when I went to college and I excelled and I became, that I had good grades, national, uh, I don't know what it was, Phi Theta Kappa, something like that, for the 2 year school that I first went to. I was just so proud of myself. Like, you
Yeah.
mean I could have done this years ago? Why didn't I do this?
Hmm.
Like, and going through something where you succeed and you get that recognition, it's just it's something that everyone needs, right? So it's important,
Yeah.
to have resilience. You need to have opportunities, you need to have chances to fail sometimes, and
Right.
bounce back from that, right? So
Right.
it, oh, well,
That's what, failure teaches us, to bounce back. It teaches us so much about ourselves and how we want to move forward and show up in the world for ourselves and for others. And um, the thing about opportunities is sometimes it is a challenge because you need to create opportunities where you can. You can't expect other people to just do everything for you. It's a balance of finding those opportunities where they are and creating them where you can.
mm, it's true, it's true. um but again, if anybody wants that number to text, 74141. It's national for United States and U.S. territories. Um, so keep that in mind. Reach out. My website, www.aliciapozony.com. We have resources there as well. But again, take advantage and reach out and just talk to somebody. Talk to a trusted friend or confidant. Um, well, Leslie, the thing that I wanted to ask you about, in your book, and writing a book is a huge feat, right? Because not only do you have to be honest with yourself, be vulnerable, put
Yeah.
yourself out there, but then there's this piece of it which has to put put yourself in the hands of critics, right? These people are going to read this,
Oh
so
God, yeah.
you know.
Right.
Um, but when I opened your book, the beginning, um, there were a few parts where, again, having a mother who was mentally ill, having psychotic breaks, and doing things that were just not normal. Not like just wearing slippers to the grocery store or something. I'm talking about like,
Right.
things that are on another level. And here we are, a
Right.
kid who's supposed to be protected and kept safe, and we're not. I just, like, here, there's one part on page 10 of your book. That night, Mom woke me by shaking my shoulder. She knelt next to William, who was asleep. As usual, the plastic wrapped mattress had deflated overnight. Get your shoes on, Mom whispered. They're after us because your aunt turned us in. The darkness in my aunt's living room told me it wasn't morning yet. Mom and William were fuzzy blobs. The sticky swish of plastic trash bags and the unlocking of the door disturbed the silence. Mom stood in the doorway like a shadow, backlit by the yellow porch lights of the apartments in the small complex. Anyway, I won't read too much, but that to me brought back memories, because my mother would, in the middle of the night or in the middle of the day, or when I came home from school, she would take me out of school and say, "We're leaving." And she would up and we would go somewhere
Wow.
because of this
Yeah.
urgent thing that was happening, or people were out to get her, or it was something I just couldn't
Yeah.
understand. And I just can't even, and it's amazing that I've connected with you, because you
Hmm.
know I'm sure there's a lot of people who have been through similar experiences, as we have, but I just haven't connected with many, in my life. And
Right. Right.
it's just so interesting that something like that was commonplace in my life. I got used to it. I then was able to use that, to my benefit. So I became an independent consultant, where I would take jobs that were 3 months, 6 months, and that change. became easy for me through what I had
Hmm.
been through. Nobody knew it.
Yeah.
People were amazed, like, "Oh yeah, I have this great consultant for you. She'll get up to speed in 4 days, and we'll be good to complete the project work." But no, nobody knew, not even me, until later when I went through counseling, why that worked for me. Because
Yeah.
I was constantly being ripped, and we were constantly moving from place to place. Um,
Hmm.
so that was just, so I just want to say that your writing really resonates with me. And again, I feel like there's other parts in the book. Again, when I was her daughter, a memoir by Leslie Ferguson, available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Kindle, free right now. But please buy the book, support your authors, put so much time and energy into this. um, so there was a in chapter 33, um, and this was about when you got rescued, and you used your resilience, um, to find serendipity, um, and so from everything before that to this part, for me, was like, you know a roller coaster. It's just a life
Hmm.
out of control, and then
Yeah.
when you get to this part, it was like a safe haven, and it was
Yeah.
just so amazing to read your book. So I want to put that out there
Thank
for the
you.
listeners.
Thank you.
Yep. And then the other thing I wanted to mention was, on page 309, um, you say normalizing your experiences has always been integral to your survival and your ability to keep your head above water while treading, to avoid being swallowed by the vortex of trauma. Um, Now, when I read that, I thought that's that's a good thing. Some people are not able to even tread that water, and they go down
Right.
paths of addiction or abuse, or
Right.
they're in unable, like that boy I mentioned who committed suicide. I you know these these things that people go through, if they don't recognize it, or get saved or get help by someone, it can definitely overtake them. And your story is just so amazing, and I'm so thankful that you put it out there.
Thank you. I wanted to speak to that last point. I think that regarding trauma, um, it will live in us either mentally or physically or both. If we don't process it, because we can't when we're young, we're either going to be so racked mentally, maybe that we are depressed, we can't seem to get out of the rut, we have to give up, or we turn to these negative outlets for some respite, for some hope that things will feel better or get better. For me, I think I was lucky in that my trauma rooted itself in my body, because it allowed me to deny mentally and emotionally so that I could just be a worker. I could play basketball and volleyball and go run and jump and pound. And I could just put my head down and focus on schoolwork. So it distracted me from everything.
Mm,
But it doesn't let us go until we process it, right?
mm,
The body remembers. So those of us who experience trauma, we have it rooted in our bodies. And we deal with it. And when we start healing and we see some of it free up, we realize, wow, this has been a long journey of trying to let go of the past, because it wants to hold on to us so tightly.
mm. It's true. It's true. I once met with a nurse who asked me if I had any abuse. And I said,
Hmm.
what, why are you asking that? It was totally, I was in for um, something like a physical, regular checkup. And and I'll never forget it. And she asked me, and I said, well, I told her about my mother. I told her about my father who had abandoned me, and she shook her head and she said, yeah, that's it. She said, your physical health is impacted by that. And, and I was young then, like 21 or something. And it was,
Wow.
I was like, yeah, I got headaches, or I got, whatever I had. It was just like not,
Yeah.
I didn't believe her. But then later, when I had depression, severe depression, I had panic attacks, I had anxiety, and I totally felt like I was going to die. It was the worst thing.
Hmm.
And I didn't have delusions like my mother. Maybe I might have if I left it go untreated,
Right.
but I did
Right.
accept medication at that time. I took 1 year of Prozac, and then I met my husband, and he really helped me with behavioral therapy. I call it behavioral therapy,
Hmm.
even though it was
Yeah.
just structure and consistency. Um,
Hmm.
and it's something that, looking back, I wonder if I had listened to that nurse and gone to therapy, or done some
Yeah.
self I don't know. I wonder what would have happened differently. But the path I went down, I I made it out. Although, going looking, I don't wish that on anybody. What you
Yeah.
know, but again, we're survivors.
Yeah. We are. We're here to tell about it, which is amazing in and of itself. So it's possible to survive.
It is. It is. And, I think we've talked a lot about um, what you've been through. Again, an amazing story of resilience, right, from start to finish. Um, you've survived trauma and you've lived to tell about it. You have your book that is out there. Um, Leslie, tell us what is next?
Well, I am working on another book, and it is fiction, although it does have some autobiographical elements, as I'm sure any fiction writer will tell you. Things are based on what they know and their lives to some degree.
Mhm.
And I am hoping to continue connecting with other writers and helping people share their stories and process and heal. So
Wonderful.
I have a writers a newsletter for writers that I'm starting, and the more memoirists I meet, they have all these questions, and I feel like who is better primed and positioned to help answer their questions than someone who has been through it and has learned the answers the hard way. Someone asked me today, um, how did I write my memoir, or because I said I'm starting this newsletter for writers so that I can help them learn more about how to write their memoirs. And she said, well, how did you write yours? And I said, the hard way. I learned everything as I went. I read memoir after memoir, which I think is crucial. Anything you want to write, if you're well read in it, only helps you. Watching videos, learning as much as I can. I did get an MFA, so I learned about writing there. But I really was like, boots on the ground, struggling for 15 plus years to make this come together. So if I can help other people do it in fewer years than 15,
Hmm.
that will be good.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, I know you've helped me, and although mine's not out there yet, it's something that,
It will be. It will be.
well, maybe you want to read it for me, because it's 400 pages and I have to cut it back. I just don't know what to cut out. So,
Wow. Well, I am an editor, so we should definitely stay in touch about
okay.
that.
All right. It sounds good. Sounds good. Um, well, Leslie, thanks so much for joining me on Resilient You. I am excited to hear about you writing another book. When you get closer, we'll have you on the show again. Um, and I want to welcome everyone. If you have time, please share share this program. Um, You can reach out if you want to be a guest or a sponsor. And again, we're looking to help other people. Um, this Power 98.5 is heard in 31 countries out of New York and Manchester, United Kingdom, on Power 98.5 FM satellite radio. So thanks everyone for joining us. And again, Leslie, thank you so much. We loved having you.
Thank you so much. I love being here. I appreciate you.
All right, thank you.